So good evening, and thank you for joining us, everybody. I am Sharon Kirsch, Executive Co-Director of Save Our Schools Arizona, and I'm pleased to serve as the moderator of this Legislative Candidate Forum for Education. It's co-sponsored by two local nonpartisan nonprofit organizations, the Arizona Center for Economic Progress and Save Our Schools Arizona Network. These organizations are collaborating to provide voters with objective and factual information about key issues in public education so that they can make informed decisions this election cycle. So we will begin by allowing each candidate up to 2 minutes to introduce themselves and their education platform. And for the sake of equal treatment and ample time for the questions and answers, we will be keeping time and asking candidates to conclude their remarks immediately if their time limit is reached. You'll see a little counter where the time is, so you will know exactly how much time you have left. And all of the audience members and the candidates will be able to see that countdown clock. So once introductions are complete, I will ask 4 questions that were contributed in advance by registered audience members. Each candidate will have 1 opportunity to answer each question in under 2 minutes. And if another candidate's answer directly references you, I may choose to allow a 1-minute response if time allows. And at the end of our forum, I will ask each candidate to deliver closing remarks of no longer than 1 minute, and we will conclude the forum. I encourage candidates to share their websites and social media handles during that time so that voters can follow you and continue to learn more about your positions. So as a quick note, unfortunately, candidates Ken Bowers and Kate Brophy-McGee chose not to participate tonight, and we're hoping that Janet Jackson might still join us. So with that, we will begin our discussion. I will allow candidates their 2 minutes with your opening statements, and we will begin in alphabetical order. And so our 4 candidates tonight are Kelly Butler, Janet Jackson, if she arrives, Aaron Lieberman, and Christine Marsh. So Kelly, you get to take it away.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you, Sharon. Thank you to Save Our Schools, everybody on this call, and thanks for everyone watching at home. I'm Kelly Butler, as state representative. I was elected first in 2016, so I'm now I've been down there for 4 years. I now serve on the Commerce and Technology committees, and I'm the ranking member on the House Health and Human Services Committee. I'm a native Arizonan. I actually grew up within the boundaries of Legislative District 28. I'm a small business owner, along with my husband, of our family's dental practice. And I'm the mom of 2 now full-grown sons. They're actually 25 and 27. So if you asked me 10 years ago if I would ever imagine being elected to office, I would have said there's no way. That is nothing that was ever in my plans. But I'm a mom, and so many of you on this call. And when my kids were in grade school in the Madison School District, that was when the legislature started cutting education funding in response to the Great Recession in 2008. And along with other parents, I started going down to the legislature, trying to explain what I saw happening in our schools. And like many of you who've been down at the legislature in the last few years, even back then, there weren't a lot of legislators who were willing to listen and commit to funding our public schools. And like many of you with children in schools now, I was seeing great teachers leaving the profession. And I will never forget a high school math teacher who left teaching because he was making more money with his side gig cleaning pools. And even recently, after the teacher salary increase, I've met a teacher who's making more money with his dog walking business. So there is so much more that we need to do to improve Arizona's education system, and not only for our children's future, but to strengthen our economy. I am looking forward to sharing tonight all of the things that I think we can do better at the Capitol, and I just appreciate the opportunity to be here. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Kelly. We will move on to Aaron Lieberman.
Hi, it's great to see everybody, and there's a lot of great friends in the audience and some new people too. I'm Aaron Lieberman. I serve alongside Kelly down at the Capitol. I just got elected 2 years ago. It was my first time in elective office. A little bit like Kelly and Christine, I grew up in LD28 right in front of Piesta Wapik. The best teacher I ever had, who actually had a huge impact on my entire life, was my 3rd grade teacher at Madison Heights. And I'm so grateful for the incredible environment that was present in Arizona when I was growing up, and so grateful for the spirit of the state and kind of what it has done. I spent my career in education, mostly focused on preschool for low-income kids. I was a Head Start teacher my first year out of college, and then I started a not-for-profit called Jumpstart that trains college students as literacy tutors all across the country to go into Head Start programs. And some 50,000 college students have done that over the last 25 years or so. I then spent about 15 years building and growing a company that runs Head Start programs all across the country. And the thing I'm proudest of, that company's gotten to pretty significant size, but I'm proudest of the impact it's had on children and families, where kids make gains at about 2.5 times the national average. 5 years ago, I moved back to Phoenix with my family to raise my 2 boys. And I was just kind of really disheartened by the political discourse and climate. Our politicians, there was so much kind of fighting each other. Our public schools, I couldn't believe the state of funding for our public schools and just the acrimony of it. One of the big reasons I ran was the threat of a massive voucher expansion. We literally, thank goodness for Save Our Schools leading the charge to help fight that back. I'm proud that the woman I replaced in the legislature was a staunch advocate for that type of dramatic voucher expansion. And I just think we need to do something different. We need to invest in pre-K, we need to invest in K-12. We need to invest in our students throughout the education continuum to make sure they can do all they can to be successful in school and in life. Thanks.
Thank you, Aaron. And now for Christine Marsha's opening statement.
Hi, everyone. Thank you to Save Our Schools and the Center for Economic Progress for hosting this forum, as well as to my fellow candidates who are here tonight. In 2018, I fell 267 votes short out of over 90,000 of winning this race, despite going up against someone who had double the money I had. And I decided to run again because we still need leaders who follow a priority list that's important to average citizens and who will truly champion public education, quality health care, and will vote for budgets that make those priorities clear. In May, my son died, taking half my soul and all of my heart with him. But I made the decision to keep running this race because it's not about me, and it's not just about LD28. It's about you and the future of this state that we all so deeply care about. My roots in small business and my teaching career have taught me to be a problem solver and to work with anyone and everyone, even people who don't always want to cooperate. And any of you all who have been or known a teenager knows how much joy some of them take from getting to be disagreeable. But I'm ready to work with others to proactively move our state forward on the myriad challenges we face, including our foster care system, which has a special place in my heart after fostering 6 children. But it's not enough to make sure that things don't get worse. We need to work on things to make them actually better. I spent my 2016 Arizona Teacher of the Year working to prevent things from getting worse. But we are going to actually, fight together to make things better for what will improve the lives of children and families.
Thank you all very much for your opening statements. So now we will move on to the questions. And these were submitted by registered participants prior to tonight's event. And for the sake of transparency for our viewers, please know that these questions were shared with all the candidates ahead of time. So candidates, remember to stick to under 2 minutes. You guys are doing great so far. And this time we will go in reverse alphabetical order for question number 1, and then we'll just alternate that. So the first question is, what resources are needed to have excellent schools? And how will you make sure that every student's public school, especially those from disadvantaged communities, have those resources? And so Christine Marsh, we will start with you.
Okay, thank you. Good question. First off, I would ask superintendents, principals, and teachers what they need, especially those people who are working in our disadvantaged communities. Too often, legislators make decisions about what schools need, except the schools don't really need those things. There are a few patterns that come up in terms of what schools need, though. We definitely need more teachers, social workers, school nurses, counselors, access to reliable broadband across the state, more computers. I'd love to explore a one-to-one program. We need flexible seating, instructional coaches. I mean, I could go on, but I'm not. And we can increase funding for those needs by evaluating the over $6 billion a year we lose through tax cuts, breaks, loopholes, credits. We could be moving away from results-based funding, still following federal guidelines, of course, reducing standardized, like getting standardized tests down to a bare minimum if possible. But I'll tell you more importantly what I won't do. I won't vote for budgets that place education, healthcare, and average hardworking people at the bottom of the priority list. Passing the budget is the most important job that a legislator has, and virtually every budget that has passed in the last 10 years, really and beyond, has placed those important priorities too low on the list. And I definitely won't be voting for tax loophole after tax giveaway that rob hardworking Arizonans of dollars for local schools in favor of tax credits for things like private airplanes.
Thank you very much. Representative Lieberman, you are up next.
Well, I think Christine gave a great list, and not surprising given her, perspective as a career educator. I think it's just so important that everyone understand our schools need more money. They still need more money. You have to look no farther than the fact that before COVID-19, we had almost 2,000 classrooms with no teacher in them. Christine always points out, I've heard her say it many times, we have plenty of certified teachers in Arizona, just many of them aren't working as teachers because the pay has been so low. And it's a competitive market. When our neighboring states are paying more, teachers who need to feed their own family are going to take some of those jobs. So we need to absolutely do more to increase funding for our schools, particularly so we can reduce those openings. Those openings have skyrocketed now with COVID, with so many teachers close to retirement and not feeling safe about going back to school. It's a real issue where we had a crisis. Now it's a catastrophe and a crisis all at once. And money doesn't fix everything. We need great school leaders, which is a really important element. We need really focused and targeted professional development. But if you don't have a teacher in front of a classroom full of kids, I don't know of any educational model that shows that you can get good outcomes and good results. In terms of making sure that the funding gets to where it's most needed, we've been doing exactly the opposite with our little bit of discretionary funding that we have. Our results-based funding actually sounds like a good idea to me if you could do something in a system that worked. That's not what we've had. Our system has completely rewarded the whiter and more affluent the district, the more money they get on results-based funding. There's very clear graphs I can show you on this. Instead of what we should be doing is broad consensus that you need more money to educate low-income kids and families. And we're actually literally in many instances spending more money in the higher income districts. We had a great bill called an opportunity weight that would actually put more money into our funding formula for lower income students. We need to bring that back. And I think that's will be one of the top priorities of our House Democratic Caucus next session to help solve this problem.
Thank you. And now on to Representative Butler.
Well, thank you. And I'm lucky I get to go last because, Christine Marsh is the expert on what's happening in our classrooms and in our schools today. So completely agree with everything that she said. This teacher shortage is horrible and it must be addressed really immediately. Everything that we've done at the Capitol is not nearly done enough. Aaron Lieberman is so right. There's so much that we need to do to address the inequalities that are in our, not only that are being exacerbated now by COVID-19, obviously, with technology that is not available to so many students in Arizona, and the resources that they need are not available. But not only that, we need to really examine areas of the budget that are making those inequalities even worse, like results-based funding that Aaron mentioned. I think it's really important to remind people that we are really having a fiscal cliff looming with the end of Prop 123 in just 2025, we could lose $250 million a year in education funding. Couple that with the permanent tax cuts that we keep making at the legislature. This last year, we cut $400 million more from our tax revenue that we should be using to fund our schools. We obviously have a crisis on our hands. We are still at the bottom nationally in funding, and it sends a message that we're not getting serious. We're not seriously educating our children. We're not seriously making sure that we have the educated workforce that we need to attract new businesses. So I think we need to stop those permanent tax cuts. We need to examine all of the loopholes and giveaways that we've already created. And we need to really get serious about the looming fiscal cliff that is on the horizon. So I think it's time that we really examine our opportunities at the Capitol and stop doing the same thing and expecting different results.
Thank you each, or thank you all of you for your answers to that question. We will move on to question number 2. And this is related to the pandemic. So schools at all levels are faced with significant new health and safety challenges due to the COVID-19 pandemic. How will you identify and advocate for resources needed to ensure healthy and safe schools, as well as the resources necessary to deliver a high quality education? And now we'll go in alphabetical order. So Representative Butler, we will begin with you.
Back at it. Well, thank you for the question. I mean, we are all obviously on edge with COVID-19, and what's happening in our schools is so important. And we need to prioritize the safe reopening of our schools, not just for students and families, but also because when our schools reopen, our economy can fully resume. But first, we need to hear from our public schools, our superintendents, our charter school leaders to find out what they need to open safely. And I've been in contact with many of those leaders, and it's different in all districts. We need to make sure that our schools are safe. I'm glad that Superintendent Kathy Hoffman worked with public health experts, and they created metrics for guidelines that schools can use to reopen. It has been really troubling, though, to see that there's conflict in communities about opening schools even before the metrics would suggest that it's safe to do so. So I think I wish we would have seen better leadership at the state level from the very beginning. The governor should have used the months when we were in that shutdown to provide resources to schools that would have helped. They could have examined their air filter systems. They could have looked at how are we going to do the appropriate distancing and cohorting of students. We should have figured out a testing and contact tracing strategy that would work in our schools. We needed to make sure that PPE is available for everyone on a school campus. So we can still take many of those steps, because going forward, the governor still has CARES Act funding available. We have $1 billion in the rainy day fund. And I would say that nothing is more important than the safety of our students and our education professionals. We need to allocate the resources that are needed to make sure that our schools can get back to full operation, but do so very safely. And that's not going to happen until we invest in making sure that we have those resources available for every school in the state. And again, the inequality between different districts who are able to provide some of those things and districts that are really struggling is just made worse by this pandemic.
Thank you. And now we will move on to Christine Marsh.
Okay. Hi, everybody again. Thank you. First off, as far as going back to school safely, we need to follow the ADHS metrics, like really hardcore, which is 2 weeks of cases below 100 per 100,000% positivity. That's 10%. That stays at below 10%. COVID-like illnesses that are, hospital visits below 10%. And as Kelly mentioned, we also need a rigorous system of contact tracing, which right now we don't have. Arizona right now is able only to trace 3% of new COVID cases within a 48-hour period of time. And beyond that, I would definitely want to be asking superintendents and principals, as I said before, what they need, because many schools have capital needs, very basic things like broken or old air conditioners, and those need to be fixed or replaced so that there's better air circulation or any air circulation. Of the 4 classrooms that I've taught in, 2 of them had inconsistent failing air systems. And that's going to be a problem when we are dealing with a pandemic like this. And the most unfortunate thing of all of this is that many of us, including me and including groups like SOS, were saying loud and clear for years that we need more funding for capital improvements, for less crowded classrooms, and more than anything, the funding to bring about those improvements to our schools. But our leaders didn't listen. They continued to pass budgets that didn't make adequate provisions for our kids, and now the roof is caving in even more than it was before.
Thank you. And now we will move on to Representative Lieberman.
I think we're getting out of alphabetical order here, but I'm trying to be flexible and just go with it, Sharon.
Sorry.
Kelly is such an expert on all of these public health questions as our ranking member on health, and she's done such an incredible job in this whole COVID area. And Christine is literally in schools every day, or has been for her entire career. I think, just for variety's sake, I literally would just say ditto to so much of what they said, because it's so on point. I will take the second part of this question, which is the resources necessary to deliver high quality education. I do serve on the Education and the Appropriations Committee, and we spent kind of some time thinking about these issues. I think there are a couple of aspects of that. One is just the ability, and Christine had mentioned this, in allowing teachers and students in schools to be one computer for every kid. So many of our schools just made Herculean investments to do that, so that when we are in this distance learning, they can have instruction that is real time with teachers in front of them, even if it's streaming. There's so many challenges with that, but I mean, my own son, who goes to our local public school, it is such a difference between what happened in the spring and how hard our schools and everyone else work to get things together for the fall if they are going to be in that distance environment. The good news is, thank goodness for the federal government providing $400 million in CARES Act money for our Title I schools in particular. That's been, every single dollar of that is being used often on this access question. But our state needs to step up as well. I mean, the governor himself still has hundreds of millions of dollars of CARES Act money. We need that money right now to do the capital improvements, to do these other things in our schools. I will say I'm very, very proud of one of the things I spent a lot of time on this summer, which is making sure that our teachers actually had access to the professional development tools they need to be effective distance learners. All of our teachers chose to teach in schools. They didn't want to teach online, right? We've been able to, between ADE, the governor's office, and the Helios Foundation, I helped get $7.5 million committed so that every single teacher in the state can get high quality online digital professional development. And already 3,000 teachers in over 600 schools have done that to try to get resources where the need is.
Thank you. So our next question, and I will get back to the proper reverse alphabetical order. So today, Arizona taxpayers subsidize private schools and private school tuition at a combined cost of nearly $400 million per year. What is your position on private school tax credits, empowerment scholarship account vouchers, and the emergence of micro schools, which all have the result of diverting public tax dollars for private use? And Christine Marsh, we will begin with you.
Okay. While we definitely need to protect our special needs students, we certainly should not expand these programs, particularly ESA vouchers. Our state's voucher programs were deemed unconstitutional, so they were given the nicer name of empowerment scholarship accounts, which are like vouchers, except with even less accountability and less transparency attached. In 2018, Arizona voters went to the polls and made it very clear how they felt about expanding those vouchers, when roughly 65% of voters voted down this voucher expansion proposal, In 2020, however, the current legislative majority made it very clear that they weren't interested in doing what the voters told them. And with the help of the current senator from this district and over the objections of a lot of stakeholders, they passed 1224, I believe the number is, which is yet another expansion of vouchers in Arizona and yet another effort to funnel our tax dollars away from our local public schools. While we definitely don't want any children currently using them to be penalized, we need to reduce them in such a way that, current users are grandfathered in. And really the bottom line for me about this issue is that it is currently legal for people to get rich off of taxpayers' dollars, but it's not ethical. And we need to take steps down at the Capitol to ensure that legality actually matches ethics. And I'm done with time to spare. Can I give it over to Kelly or Aaron?
Thank you. We will move on to Representative Lieberman.
So, this is a very complicated issue. First and foremost, we shouldn't, I'll just pick up exactly with what Christine said. We shouldn't be expanding these voucher programs by any stretch of the imagination. On the expansion across state lines that happened in the last legislative session, I think all of us were willing to support, hey, if a kid is already going to one of those schools, let them finish. But why do we need to create this problem again and again and again? It was so disappointing to see that come down on what was effectively yet another kind of party line vote. It all gets to, let's spend our time working in the schools that all of the kids go to, which is our public schools. That's where our kids are. Let's put all of our energy into fixing those. There's something very odd with the whole STO situation, that whole world. When it all started in the late 90s, there were about 22,000 kids in private schools in Arizona. 23 years later, whatever it is, there's about 22,000 kids in private schools in Arizona. Something does not make sense. There's not a whole lot of demand. This isn't what people are beating the door down. What people want is great public schools. And we've got a good system to do that. It just needs more money. We should be looking how we can send every last dollar to support our public schools and making sure that we're doing all that we can to ensure that they're great, especially when we have so much parent choice. I think that is a strength of the system in Arizona, where you can choose among district schools, you can choose among charters, you can choose among even districts that you don't live in. That's giving parents a lot of choice right there. Let's figure out how to make those choices work as well as they can. And that's what parents want. I mean, overwhelmingly so. Specific to the micro schools, this is another version of just a complete lack of accountability. All of the vouchers, if people were willing to stand up and say they'd support the AZ merit test, and we could actually understand if they were willing to be accountable for the outcomes that we demand of our public schools, I think you could have a good debate on that. It's hard, but there's no accountability and no transparency into how these funds are being spent. It's a very difficult situation.
Thank you. Representative Butler, you are up.
Thank you. It's always so hard to go last because I agree with everything that Christine, Marsha, and Aaron Lieberman just said. And, we work on these issues a lot. And I think that we all approach it knowing that many families are using ESAs and these other programs because their child with special needs or other learning challenges were not having their needs met in our public schools. And the reason is because we kept cutting the funding for our public schools, which depleted the resources for these programs that are really needed. So I think the ultimate solution is to fully fund our public schools so that they can compete and better provide all of the resources that are needed to help these students get exactly what they need, so that they don't have to go out and find these other situations and scenarios for themselves. But until we can do that, the legislature is still very lax in requiring accountability for the use of these funds. It's still a problem to me that we don't require a certain curriculum to be used and you could still receive some of these funds without anyone knowing if you're using a quality curriculum. You can also, we are not finding out about educational outcomes. So these students may be receiving all of these dollars and then we find out when they turn 18 that they really didn't learn anything. These are real big problems with the accountability and transparency of these programs that I think we need to fix immediately. And then the new micro schools programs that we are seeing, these are for-profit new schemes really to take more of our tax dollars and use them in a way that is totally not transparent or accountable. It's brand new, and I think that we're going to see these things trying to expand. And I think it's really worth noting that our state senator from LD28 was actually promoting those micro schools. So I think it's really troubling that we would be promoting something, we shouldn't be promoting something that is so lacking in transparency or accountability.
Thank you. So our fourth and final question, and then we'll have closing statements. So do you support Proposition 208, Invest in Education, which will establish a 3.5% income tax surcharge on the wealthiest 1% of Arizonans, raising approximately $940 million annually to increase teacher and classroom staff salaries, reduce class sizes, and to more than double state funding for career and technical education? If you do not support it, what, if anything, will you do to increase funding for public schools? And Representative Butler, you get to go first this time.
Thank you. Then they can try and follow me this after I go. So, well, I think obviously we are here today because Arizona is still below pre-recession funding. We have among the largest class sizes. Teacher pay is still too low to attract and retain the teachers we need. We still have the worst ratio of counselors to students in the country. And now COVID-19 has highlighted the disparity in opportunity, and we must address it now. The majority party in charge at the legislature has used all of these short-term schemes like Prop 123, like an over-reliance on sales tax to keep trying to patch these holes. But we absolutely must find a long-term, sustainable, and adequate source of funds for our public schools. So I'm glad to see Prop 208 on the ballot. I hope we can make the case to voters why it's so important to pass and finally provide a real long-term solution. When we finally send the message that Arizona is not last in education funding, I know we'll see improvement in our economy, and businesses will get the message that we're investing in our future workforce, and having this source of funds will finally send the message that we're serious about educating our children in Arizona. So I'm glad this is on the ballot. I'm looking forward to seeing how the voters are going to vote on it. And for myself, I am going to vote yes.
Thank you. Representative Lieberman, you are next.
Well, again, I'll just build on some of Representative Kelly Butler's points here, which is how did we get into this situation? Why are we here? And the short answer is inaction down at the legislature to solve what 80% of Arizonans think is the biggest problem confronting our state, adequately funding our public schools. This is not exactly how I would have designed it. I think it could have been a little bit broader based and had drawn in more Arizonans and helping to solve this problem. But this was the same issue people had on the Invest in Ed initiative from 2 years ago. There's been 2 years to come up with some alternatives. We've been waiting for the business community. We've been waiting for the philanthropic community. We've been waiting for anybody to come up and put something on the table to say, okay, we didn't like that, so here's how you can do it. And it's just more of the same, where we don't get any solutions. We get a lot of criticism from the sidelines, nobody willing to step up and take what is sometimes an unpopular or difficult position of saying, look, we need more money for our schools. Where is it going to come from? One of the most heartbreaking things, and Representative Butler mentioned it, is that we cut $400 million in taxes my first year in the legislature. When I say we, I mean straight party line vote with every single Republican voting for it against the opposition of every single Democrat. Just think about that for a minute. That $400 million tax cut, which by the way came after people had paid their taxes that year. I'm honored to represent one of the highest income zip codes in the state. We all in LD28. Not one person had emailed complaining about their taxes. They had already paid it, and then we retroactively cut their taxes. $400 million a year. I mean, over 5 years, that's $2 billion. That right there would have been half of the increase of Invest in Ed. So when you keep digging the hole deeper from a revenue perspective, and then when you refuse to come up with any solutions, eventually people take matters into their own hands. And that's what teachers did here. That's what the entire education community did here. And I think it's great that the citizens of Arizona are going to have an opportunity to vote yes or no on if they want to solve this problem this way.
Thank you. Christine Marsh, you are up.
Yes, I support it. However, I want to be clear. It's heartbreaking that our state's education funding crisis has come to this. 208 was a direct result of legislators abdicating their responsibility to fund our schools. We should not have to raise taxes to fund our schools. We don't really even need to raise taxes to fund our schools. But given the difficult choice between raising taxes on anybody and keeping our education funding where years of bad budgets have left it, which is the bottom of the nation, voters took matters into their own hands by getting the signatures required to run this ballot initiative. And I support that. And I want to be really clear, another time really clear. Our schools are in dire need of funding, and that funding does indeed pay off. In December of 2019, there's one source, EPI, that has Arizona having a 7,500 teacher shortage, which is much higher than other stats that I've seen. And due to COVID, that number is going to be even higher. 7,500 openings actually translates to 225,000 kids who are in classrooms with no teacher, an unqualified teacher, or in big classes because classes have gotten combined to cover for the lack of a teacher. Despite that, and despite the fact that per pupil spending is at 48th in the nation, our kids actually perform pretty well. They go up to 42 for graduation rate. And really, the only other solution that people were offering were regressive taxes, which I am absolutely opposed to. And one final point, from a purely economic perspective, investments in education pay off because they create higher levels of education, create more productivity, which increases GDP. And I'm done.
Thank you. So thank you all so much for sharing so much valuable information with us. And we will conclude by allowing each of you 1 minute to just share your final remarks. And this time we will go in reverse alphabetical order. So Christine, you get to start.
Okay. Thank you. While my experiences as a mother, foster mother, and teacher have pushed me to run for this position, my primary motive for running is my belief that Arizona needs change. For too long, Arizona has suffered under one-party rule. Our legislature never restored pre-recession K-12 funding. Our classes remain among the highest in the nation. Access to quality, affordable health care has not been upped, not expanded. And in a COVID-19 pandemic that we are facing has taken way too many lives and livelihoods. And meanwhile, the current legislative majority's priorities aren't solving these problems, but instead expanding things like vouchers. And we need to absolutely get down there and change the balance of power so we can solve some of these crucial issues that are facing Arizona's families and kids.
Thank you. Representative Lieberman?
Well, thank you so much for having us and for the, it's just been a great forum. I'm not gonna lie, I'm really disappointed that our Republican colleagues aren't here. I think a district like Legislative District 28, which is a real toss-up, quite honestly deserves better. We have different ideas on policy. We should have that debate so voters know where we stand and what we're thinking. And to have not a single person show up from the other side is really just disappointing for the spirit that I think is so wonderful of LD28, which is a thinking district that deeply wants to do what's best for the state. I will tell you, I think you probably see it right here with Kelly Butler, myself, and Christine Marsh. You're getting a team. You're getting 3 people who are committed to working together to get the state on the right track. And I think that's what we really need. I spent 2 years down at the legislature seeing how the group that got us into this mess operates. We need to do something very, very different. We need to bring common sense approaches that are broadly supported by 80% or more of Arizonans front and center. And that's exactly what's going to happen when the 3 of us get down there. And I'm so excited to think about January having 3 Democrats representing us in Legislative District 28.
Thank you. And Representative Butler?
Thank you very much. This has been great to be here with all of you, and thanks for everybody watching at home. I know that many of you have been down at the Capitol with us fighting against the full voucher scheme that one year, 2017? We were fighting against tax cuts every single year that were going to deplete our revenues. We were fighting against just bad ideas to just continue to rely on sales taxes instead of sincerely looking at our revenue and finding solutions for our children. And I was down there celebrating with Red for Ed when they really made a difference and were able to really make the case for our teachers and for our schools. I am looking forward to getting past this election and getting to a new majority where we're going to be celebrating a lot more often when we have ideas and measures to truly support our schools, to truly support our teachers and students, and to truly move our state forward. I'm very much looking forward to the new day in Arizona after November 3rd. So thank you so much for the opportunity tonight.
Thank you all again so much for being here. I know that we all appreciate your willingness to be here and to share your views honestly and directly, so thank you. And viewers, we thank you too for joining us. We have a full-length video of tonight's forum that will be available on our YouTube channel after the event. So don't forget to mail back your ballot by October 28th at the very latest. Voting centers are open for in-person voting as early as October 7th. Look online or post questions in the comments thread if you need any help finding a location. Again, I'm Sharon Kirsch, and on behalf of the Arizona Center for Economic Progress and Save Our Schools Arizona Network, thank you so much for being an informed voter. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.